It was the Friday night before Thanksgiving, and my mom had gone on a date with George Strong. I hated that guy. He spoke with a lateral lisp. Everything that came out of his mouth sounded like "kiss this fish." The week before my 14th birthday, I'd found my dad dead of a heart attack on the bathroom floor. And George Strong's wife allegedly had run off with their painting contractor. I have no idea what my mom saw in George Strong, except for a warm body to sit next to at Hayward Anderson's Hickory Steakhouse, where he treated her to prime rib 2 Saturdays a month. After my dad died, I became jumpy, nervous, and noises at night began to bother me, and I'm not sure what I thought lurked in my basement. I just knew that I had to be vigilant. So I honed my solitary ritual of patrol down to a series of carefully calculated moves. Take off my shoes, place them at the top of the basement steps, remove the bone-handled carving knife from the oak scabbard, get the meat tenderizer from the utility cabinet, breathe slowly, descend stairs, turn door handle of basement door, and shout, "Show yourself, or you're carnage!" That night there was nothing but an interior breeze, as though something had moved but was gone. I had been in treatment for a year with Dr. Sherman E. Nelson, Ph.D., and so I suspected that whatever was causing me to rehearse like this alone in my house month after month was probably in my mind. But that night, as I stood in my stocking feet at the basement door, it began. Slow, metallic tapping coming from somewhere in the basement. I reached around the corner of the wall and switched on the light, and there, sitting at my father's workbench, with his back to me, was a man, his head bowed. He was small, middle-aged. He didn't have any hair on his hands, and the back of his neck was a woody gray. The bars on the windows of the basement meant that the only access was through the house, and unless my mother was storing extra men in the basement, this was an intruder. Ever so slowly he turned toward me. Over his breast pocket, the name Stoddard was sewn onto a small patch. He blinked. He didn't say anything. He didn't have any complexion, absolutely no color whatsoever to his face. I gripped the handle of the carving knife, and I said, "Are there more of you?" And he said, "Just my mother. She dogs my trail like a Belgian shepherd. She can't cook. She stinks of garlic and lavender, dresses like a Sears model. She's been offering the same lousy advice to me ever since I died and started visiting your basement." And then he stood up behind my father's workbench, and he said, "There is someone else coming through right now who wants you to know that he's very, very proud of you. He wants me to tell you that he loves you. Your dad—" "Go to hell! What are you, James Van Prague?" He stands up and he steps out from behind the woodbench. And I held my knife up, pointed at his chest, and I said, "Step back." And he says, "I know what you're going through. The grieving, the fear." And then he holds his arms out to me. And he says, "Would you give me a hug?" I swung the meat tenderizing hammer and caught him hard in the temple. He staggered back, and he put his hand to his head, and blood started spurting out from between his fingers. And he starts pulling at a large flap of skin in front of his ears, and he tears it off, and he examines it. And then he says to me, "That hammer of yours made the weirdest marking. Does your mommy use that thing for Salisbury steaks? Then I brought the hammer down hard on his skull, making a liquidy crunching sound. And my hammer was a 3-pound sharpened cube of pig iron that had diamond-shaped dimples on the face meant for softening gristly steak. And the long oak handle meant that I could bring it down as smoothly as I wanted, like an axe. So I pulled it out of his skull, bringing with it bits of brain and hair. And he goes down on his knees, but his eyes are still open, and he looks at me like we're still chatting. I hit him one more time right square in the forehead, and he goes down, his eyes closed, and he lies there, still as ice. But there's no blood coming from his wounds. What little blood there was seemed to have dried into cakey, clotted clumps like brownish-red cottage cheese. And then he rolls over and props his chin on his hand like he's lying on a bunk bed swapping stories. And I stand over him and I say, "Were you a suicide?" And he flips his hair and smooths it back and says, "I suppose you're going to ask if I regret it." Well, I am, and I do. I was a jumper. Oh, splat! Right off the old Mid-Wilshire B of A at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, he says. I borrowed my mom's Camaro and drove to the bank, walked right into the lobby, up the elevator to the 9th floor, out onto the roof, go to the south edge, and stand there looking toward Long Beach. And then this fat guy in the parking lot, sitting on a big, tricked-out Honda Goldwing motorcycle, looks up at me and yells, "Come on, jump! I gotta get home for dinner!" And that's when the LAPD tried to grab me, but they messed up. I jumped anyway. I hope I made that fat guy on the Honda happy. I was on the couch. My mom had woken me up, and the cable was out again, just pixelated snow and white noise coming from the TV set. And she said, "Did you cook yourself a steak tonight?" She noticed the carving knife and the meat tenderizing hammer on the floor. "Didn't leave a mess. Good work, honey." And then, from the basement, came the muted sound of a slow, metallic tapping. I tugged at the blanket that covered me, for it had gotten colder.